Why do you want to become a leader? It's a great question. My guest today poses that question because he thinks a lot of times individuals are seeking a leadership position or find themselves in a position of leadership, but they're there for the wrong reasons. They're there for the paycheck. They're there for the recognition. They're there for the title, but they're really not there to lead. And that is a critical difference in today's society, especially with social media and everyone out there promoting themselves and everyone's a coach and everyone has a course. What we're going to talk about today is why leadership is important and how you need to put people first. So my guest today is Jon Rennie. He is an author of the book, I Have the Watch. That is a military expression where you are in charge. You are responsible for everything. So his book, phenomenal, probably one of the best books I've run across in terms of leadership. So I highly recommend it. But what we talk about is why leadership is important, what you need to focus on, the skills that are necessary for you individually, the skills that you should be looking for in your team members, and how you can build the skills necessary to lead those teams, to become the leader. It's so aligned with the mission of this podcast. We come here every single week to help you become a better leader. And I can't think of anyone better than Jon S Rennie, former submarine commander, who now is a business owner himself after being in the business community for 30 plus years, building corporations, helping them succeed. He went on his own. Great conversation. Can't wait to share it. So let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge. Now What? With author Jon S Rennie. All right, Jon, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to jump right in because when I got your book, let me make sure it doesn't reflect here. I Have the Watch. As I mentioned to you just briefly in the pre-show, it's rapidly becoming my favorite leadership book because it's very clear. It's very to the point, not long-winded, very short chapters, but it is really chock full of information. But one of the things in the introduction that maybe you could help explain for the audience. When you say, or in this way, the person will be saying it, I have the watch. What does that mean? I know you served as a submarine commander, but you hear that from military, I have the watch. But what does that mean?
Yeah, as I served on submarines for 5 years, did 7 deployments. And when you had the watch, it meant that you were in charge of that particular station. So as an officer, you would either be engineering officer of the watch, so you'd be in charge of the entire engine room, or you'd be the officer of the deck. You're actually in charge of the entire boat at that time. So you were responsible for the mission, whatever that was, for that day, for that period of time that you were in charge, and the people. They were under your authority. You were responsible for them. And what I noticed, I did 22 years working in corporate America. And what I noticed is that many managers were promoted into management jobs and they didn't take that approach like, okay, I have the watch now. I'm responsible for everything that happens during this time. I'm responsible for the mission and the people. They don't take that approach. Instead, they take the approach of, hey, great, I got a promotion. I got a fancy office. I'm going to work in my office with the door shut and work on emails. And so they forget that once you're moved into a leadership role, you now have the watch. And I think you're in charge, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're in charge. Now what, right? So it answers that question is you have the watch. You're now responsible. That means that anything bad that happens on your watch, you're responsible for it. Anything good that happens on the watch, you're also responsible for it. And so you have ownership. Once you are in charge and you're in charge of a department, in charge of a group, a business, what have you, you now are responsible.
So when you say that, and I agree with you in terms of sometimes people get promoted or put in these positions, in your experience, is it the fault of the individual, fault of the organization, or both? Because a lot of times people are promoted to a position to, let's say, run a team because they were good at what that team did. That doesn't make them a good leader or a good manager. And a lot of times That's why I started this podcast, is I saw a lot of people who were just left in that position and said, okay, Jon, you figure it out. So in
Mm.
your experience, is it a combination of both, the organization not preparing them, the person not taking it seriously to prepare themselves? Where do you see businesses or organizations could improve on this?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really both. One is we tend to promote individual contributors who are great individual contributors. So the best
Mhm.
engineer, we say, well, you're going to be in charge of the engineering department, right?
Right.
The best sales guy somehow becomes the sales manager, and the skills that you need to be the best salesman or the best engineer are not the skills to
Right.
be in charge and to be in leadership roles. And so we promote people for the wrong reason generally inside of corporate America. We promote people based on great individual contributions, right? And a
Right.
lot of times those people move into those roles and they say, well, these skills that I have, right? I'm a really good salesman.
Mhm.
Those skills, they got me here. So I'm going to
Right.
keep doing that, right? Because that's their comfort zone. That's what they're used to. That's what got them promoted. And so they do those skills and they try to use those same skills in their new role. Well, when you become, a manager and suddenly you have direct reports, things change, right? So now
Right.
the skills that are really important is how you manage the team underneath you. And so we fail as corporations and companies to look for those leadership characteristics in our employees and then promote those that have demonstrated leadership skills, right? So we fail there, and then we fail with the individual contributors are promoted when they don't say, oh, this is something different. I
Right.
need to become an expert now in managing and leading people. I've got to get outside my comfort zone and learn about how to manage people. So it's I think on both sides.
Right. And to your point, I think the way I've described it to companies when I will go in and work with them is that now that manager who's been promoted, they're on someone else's team. And I think
Mm,
that's where sometimes the disconnect is. So if I got promoted, or you're the leader above me and you promoted me, well, I'm on your team. Theoretically, you should be coaching me to be better at my job while I'm working, going down to coach my team to do better at their job. And I see that's the disconnect a lot of times, is that the people above them, they promote you and they're like, okay,
mm, mm,
Jon, go. And then they'll either celebrate you, not celebrate you when you're missing, but they don't seem to feel compelled to say, they're on my team. As you said, I'm responsible for them. I'm
mm.
responsible to build those skills.
Yeah, yeah.
So in that, and your book really focuses on a lot of these. And so a few of the traits, when you said that briefly, we look for leadership
Mm,
traits. Give me a few of those leadership traits. So if I was, I'll pose this. There's a team of, we'll go with what you were saying before, salespeople, and you're looking for someone to step up and lead this team.
mm.
And there's a lot of different scenarios of why we need a leader, but let's just say we need a leader. What skills would you be looking for to say that's the person out of this group that should be put in charge?
Yeah, I mean, leadership is complicated, right? There's been
Mm-hmm.
15,000 books written on the subject, but it also is kind of simple, right? It's about motivating a group of people to get things done. And so I would say I'm looking for people who have demonstrated the ability to motivate a group of people to do something. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times as a leader, I'm looking for those high potential employees that can go to the next level and be promoted. So a lot of times what I'll do is give them a special project, give them an assignment where they have to do a mini project where they actually have to influence people that don't work for them to get something done, because I want to see can they demonstrate
Oh,
the
I like
ability
that.
to
Yeah.
rally a group of people to get
Mm-hmm.
something done. And so special projects, stretch assignments, things like this are a really good chance for you to say, I see this individual over here, Joe's got some skills. I'm going to give them a stretch assignment just to see what they do with it. And it gives you a great chance to see if they can actually bring a group of people together, get something done. And then if they can't, so if they do, you've got a great data point. You may have someone that has a potential for leadership, but if they fail in that, you also have another great data point as well. It's like, okay, they're not ready yet, but that's
Right.
okay. Right.
Right.
And so, a year from now, 2 years from now, we'll try that again. So I think giving people stretch assignments, giving them special projects, it's a chance to evaluate them, is a great way to see if they have some leadership skills, if they're willing to step up, do something extra. And again, really one of the more difficult leadership tasks is to be able to lead a group of people that don't work for you. So that's when
Mhm.
you're having to use your ability to influence. And so I'm looking
Right.
for people who have the ability to influence.
Well, what I like about that, and I hope audience, I hope you picked up on what Jon said, is that you as a leader choosing the next leader or manager of that team, you started giving assignments, which was great. But what I again, I hope you picked up on this. You said if someone wasn't ready, maybe a year or 2 years down the road, you didn't discard them and say
Mm.
they'll never be. But it's almost as if you're starting to document your team's strengths and weaknesses to build that bench where you say, they're not ready today, but here's a few things that I have to work on. So when they take that next test, I've prepared them a little further. Then at least I, as a leader, can say, I did everything I could. If they don't apply it or use it, or maybe they aren't going to be ready. But I really like that idea of not discarding someone just because they failed one time. I think
Mm.
that's really good. So in your book, again, I keep going back to the book because it's just, folks, get this book. You talk about leadership very clearly. Probably
Mm.
one of the clearest meanings or definitions of leadership. But you also have the triangle. And I
Mm.
know we see those of you who watch Ted Lasso or John Wooden, you see his triangle and all the rest of it. But yours just, the 3 points you had. But what I was fascinated, and I'd love you to explain it, is the leader was inside the triangle. I've never seen that where the triangle surrounds that person. And you had three words at each of the point. Could you explain that triangle and its significance?
Yeah, so the triangle is based on Kevin Cruz is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. He writes on leadership, and he has a definition of leadership, which I really have adopted because I think it makes the most sense. Which is a leader is someone who motivates people to get things done, so to accomplish goals. That's what I talked about earlier. And so
Mm-hmm.
in the triangle was just my way of representing. I talked to a lot of college students, and college students like models and formats. So I came up with this idea as I was speaking to college students. And so we have a triangle, all sides are equal. We have the goal at the top, or sorry, we have people at the top, and we have goal and motivation of the two corners, right? And we put the leader in the center. And so it's based on that definition, which is the leader is responsible for motivating a group of people to accomplish a goal, right? So that's the three things that they have to balance as a leader. And we put the leader in the center of that triangle because you're coordinating those three activities. You're making sure you
Mm-hmm.
have the right people that are in their right roles, that you have set the goals properly and communicated those goals, and that you're motivating each individual in their own special way to be able to achieve those goals. So you're constantly have those three elements in flux, and the leader is in the center coordinating like a conductor, making sure everybody's all those things, these are in play. And I put people on the top because at the end of the day, leadership is a people business. It's about motivating
Mm-hmm.
a group of people. And so people are on top, just as a reminder that nothing gets done without people. So our plans are useless.
Right.
Our ships go nowhere without a crew, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
our organizations go nowhere without people. So putting the people on the top of that triangle is just a reminder that they're the priority.
I see, and that's what I loved about that image was, and when I read that, and you said we keep the people at the top, as we said earlier offline before we got started, sometimes leadership can be very complex, but as you said also in your first few answers, it can be very simple, very common sense. But many leaders don't put the people first.
Mm.
And maybe the goal is first, but as you said, we're not getting to that goal. We're not accomplishing that goal without our people. And we need people, and we need someone to, one, guide them, show them the way, show them how, and then, as you said, motivate them, help them through those times where doubt is coming, they're not focused, or whatever's going on. I think that really is a missing piece for leaders. They just think I've heard some leaders say, well, I'm not a therapist. or I'm
Hmm.
not a babysitter. And my philosophy is I think you're a little of everything. You're parent, you're disciplinarian, you're therapist, you're coach, you're mentor. It's what lever do I have to pull today to continue to keep the team moving forwards towards that goal? Would you agree?
Yeah, it's interesting because right now I'm studying for my doctorate in strategic leadership, and so I'm doing a lot more academic work lately. And one of the things I'm realizing is it's a lot of psychology. So
Mm-hmm.
leadership is a lot. So when I say leadership is a people business, and now I wrote that long before I went into my doctoral program. But the more and more I dive into the research behind effective leadership and effective
Mm-hmm.
leadership processes, it's all about people, and it tends to lean very heavily on the psychology side. So how do you motivate people to get things done is a big essential element, and so the research is all around psychology. So if you say, well, I want to be in charge, but I don't want to have to deal with people issues. Well, I would say don't be in charge. Like
Right.
become a sole entrepreneur, like a solo entrepreneur. Do something where you don't have to have people working for you, because it's always going to be about people issues. So you're never going to avoid that if you want to be in charge of a business. If you want to run an organization, a nonprofit, you have to influence people. So it is going to be people issue. It is going to be psychology. It is going to be cheerleading. It is going to be consoling. It's all those things. And so you have to really have a love of people if you want to be in a leadership role.
Right. And that moves me right into my next point, because one of the questions, or one of the first chapters, I guess, and I thought to myself, this is something I needed to chat with you about, because the question you put out there was, to anyone, why do you want to become a leader?
Yeah.
And you said there's a lot of people who are doing it for the wrong reasons. They're
Mm.
becoming a leader to, for notoriety, for publicity, for money, for a position, for a title. And my brain just kept going. I saw something the other day on one of the news feeds that says there are more business consultants, business coaches nowadays than there are actual managers or people in positions to be coached. And I kept thinking, it seems like everyone has an opinion on leadership, but when you're really watching some of these, it's all about them. They're just let me tell you how great I am as a leader. And you go, have you ever led anything? Well, no, but I know how to lead. And here, buy my course, or buy
Yeah.
this, or buy
Yeah.
that. So why in your mind is that? I mean, you've been touching around the edges of it a little bit, but why do you need to ask yourself that question? Why do you really want to become a leader in order to be a successful leader?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of those ideas come from Angela Duckworth. She wrote Grit, and it's a great book, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about that we have created leadership as like the pinnacle, like in success. So you, instead of creating ways that people can move more technical, or more like, I'm a great salesperson, but you can get more and more like bigger territories and things like that. We
Right.
tend to quickly move people to leadership, and that seems to be the pinnacle, especially in the United States, of achievement in your life. Right, we're going to move you into a leadership role. So we tend to think of that as our only method for advancement, and that's problematic, because not everybody, as we talked about earlier, has the skills to be a leader. So the
Mm-hmm.
question is, why do you want to be a leader? It's a really important question, because the best leaders become leaders not to make money, but to make a difference. So they feel
Hmm.
compelled to move into that role because they feel like they can have a bigger impact on the organization in those roles than if they were in an individual contributor role, or what have you. And so if I look at any job that I've ever taken in my leadership journey, it's always because I was like, okay, I think I can fix that. Like, I'm motivated to the task, to the challenge, to make a difference, and not so much about how much money I'm going to make, or the corner office, or the title. In fact, my wife would always say, you've been dragged kicking and screaming up the corporate ladder. That was pretty
Right.
much my career. Was they just kept giving me more and more things to fix because I was good at fixing smaller things. So I kept getting more responsibility,
Right.
fixing bigger and bigger things. But I was a person on a mission, right? So I had established to myself what my North Star was as a corporate leader, which was to turn around struggling manufacturing businesses. That was my mission. That was my core. That was in my heart and soul. And so I kept finding opportunities where I was given opportunities to be able to carry out my North Star. So that's why I became a leader. That's why I was given more and more responsibility. Sure, there were titles, sure, there were money, sure, there were accolades and all that. But I did it because I had a passion for blue collar workers, and I wanted to make sure to create a place where they could have a safe place to work, where they could work their entire career. And so that's what I was trying to create, those stable environments that would, generate jobs for a long time. And so that was my North Star. That was my mission. And when you have a mission and when you have a passion, right, and you're able to do that as a leader, you're going to be a much more effective leader than someone just going in there for the money or the title or the
Yeah.
car or the bonus check.
I see. I like that, and I feel that as you were saying that, my mind was jumping around to people I've met, people I know, who are such in a rush to be the leader, and they're not ready to be the leader. And what happens is they get in that position and they fail for whatever reason. But there's also a time where you can't. We're in as large as business is, it's small, meaning that if all of a sudden you failed 3 or 4 times, you may not get that next opportunity if your goal, as you're saying, is I just want the title. I want to be in charge. I want to do this so that I, in my mind, justify, well, I did this, versus taking a step backwards or two to gain the skills and being honest with yourself and saying, I'm not ready. But that's a very hard conversation to say to yourself, especially if you've tasted a title, to go backwards. You're worried about what everyone else is thinking, versus, to your point, is I have a mission and I need to get better at what I'm doing, or else I'm never going to accomplish the mission. Yes, I'll get a title. Yes, I'll get money. But if my true mission, and you talk about it also from a military standpoint, where everyone is, has everyone's wearing the uniform and we're unified together and we're moving, and the mission is more important than individuals. And I think we're under such a lot. People are under pressure now to be a manager fast, to get a title fast. And so we've thrown this number out there that says, if you don't have this by X year, you're a failure. But I see more and more people getting it and failing because they didn't take time. It's just, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it is. And I think you hit on something that's really important, is that really we need to build our careers ourselves, and so if you are lacking in an area, let's say you want to be a general manager someday and you've always been in operations, supply chain, quality, production, and you have no sales experience. That's when you say, I'm going to go for a moment, I'm going to go into sales,
right?
And I'm going to gain that skill set that I'm lacking. And maybe that's a lateral move, that's not a promotion, but you're building those skill sets, and you're building a talent stack that's going to help you be more effective when you get to the next area. And so, I'm sure you talk about it on the show a lot, but you alone are responsible for your career, right? No one's going to do that for you,
right?
And you have to work to make sure you develop all the right skills to do the thing that you want to do most in life. So if you say, I want to run a manufacturing business, then you need to figure out, how do I get those opportunities to learn the skills that I need, so that once I get to that level, I'm going to be successful in that. And so part of it may be taking other roles that are not promotional roles, to be able to achieve those experiences and those skills to be able to get to the next level. But, when I look at people that are successful, they're willing to take the time, right, to acquire the skills and the experiences before they rush into a general management role or as a leadership role. So it's important to take the time to learn, to develop. the best leaders are also readers. You spend time reading and learning. And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm learning something new about leadership every day. It's a complicated subject. So don't think that you're an expert in 2 years, 5 years, 6 years. I've been doing it 30 years, and
Uh,
I'm shocked at what I read. Sometimes I go, I never thought of it that way. It's
well,
crazy.
that's again, that's why your book was so clear, is that it put things in things that I believe in a different way, that I was like, oh, that's a really good way to say that or put that in. And that idea of time, my grandmother, my father's mother, was a hard, very stern woman, Irish stock. And I remember her, she's passed now a good 20 years, but she told, when I was graduating college, and she sat me down and she said, I feel sorry for you. Because I said, oh, I feel sorry for you, Graham. You're getting older and things like that. She goes, no, I feel sorry for you. And I said, why would you feel sorry for me? She goes, because your grandfather, when he went to work, he worked in a company, we're a different company, but he didn't become a manager until he was in his late 30s, early 40s. And you didn't become a vice president of something until you were in your 50s. And you didn't become a
Right.
partner potentially till you were in your 60s. And she was the one who said, and I feel bad because everyone has said, if you don't have your whole life figured out by the time you're 30, you're a failure. And she goes, and I feel very sad
Yeah.
that you don't have, that your generation doesn't have the ability or willingness or feel comfortable with, to your point, is not taking the linear path. And
Mhm.
that's where I think, to your point, was it's really important to build that skill set, because I'm sure you, as someone who ran organizations, when you're sitting across from someone and you're interviewing them, you're looking for skills. You're not looking, and you're looking for some of these intangibles, and through your conversations and questioning, you start to uncover this. And in the book, you talk about this. There were 3 traits of high performing teams. I believe that was what you were talking about. And forgive me a second here, because I have them written down and I don't like to miss. One was complementary skills. And
Yeah.
now a lot of times people get that one. Well, they'll say, if you're a leader and you're not good at certain things, hire people to do that. I get that. Then there was, it was, the one that I really liked was, the ability to be proven under adversity. Now, someone will sit here and say, what adversity is a team going through? But it wasn't that. The more I read and understood what you were saying, is it was that idea of persistence.
Yeah.
Looking for someone who's willing to keep going and trying new things and figuring it out on their own, versus just giving up at the first sign of struggle. Explain that a little more, because I think that, to me, when I read the other 2, I was like, yeah, I heard about those. That one, that was never really something put as clearly as that when I'm looking at a team or building a team, as traits of some of those teammates that I really need to have.
So yeah, I started my own manufacturing business 7 years ago. So left corporate, started my own business, and so you start small, you build a team, right? And so one of the most important characteristics I looked for when I was building that team was some sort of displayed somewhere in that person's history where they displayed grit, the ability to, uh, Angela Duckworth calls it passion and perseverance for long-term goals, right? So
Mhm.
show me an example of where you overcome something difficult, right? To accomplish an objective. And so because I was building a team from scratch, knowing that we were going to be in an adverse environment, the smallest company in our industry, we were going to face a lot of difficulty getting this
Mhm.
business started up. We're building a factory, designing all our products, all that. I needed people that weren't going to quit, right?
Right.
People that are willing to, once a wall is built up, that they go, all right, well, there's a wall. How am I going to get around it, over it, through it, under it? And I hired one of my early employees was a Marine. He would go right through it. But so we were building a team of people that had grit, had perseverance, are willing to work hard, not give up, and not get discouraged when things don't go their way. And I think when you have a team like that, it makes it a lot easier when the storms come, because they will come, and they're able to persevere, and they're able to handle the stress of the moment, and be able to smile during it. And I think, and part of that, and you might laugh at this, but part of it is having a sense of humor. I've noticed that people who have a sense of humor, and maybe that's my military background, but when things bad happen, usually the best people were making jokes about it and smiling and having a good laugh over it versus
Right.
saying, "Well, it was me." So I'm looking for the people that can take a punch and not give up. And because that
Right.
was really important, especially when if I have 10 employees, right, one employee is 20% of my crew. That person better not give up when things go bad. I've lost, I'm down to 80%, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
so let's go expand just a little bit on this. Let's a slight pivot here because I've started a few businesses myself, and usually what you just talked about, that I don't want to say it's easy, but you have more control, I guess, because I always said that first group of people, you're all this crazy band of brothers and, men and
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
together, unified with a purpose. And those starting 4 or 5, whatever that number is, you see the mission, you see what you're doing, you're all in, you're persistent. It is that no, everybody's wearing a million hats. But as you expand and as you start to grow, all of a sudden there's other people in between you and the hiring. And
Mm.
all of a sudden now you're not touching all of those people all the time, although you should be involved with them. But in terms of that hiring, and I think the reason why I'm sort of focusing on this, I think for those of you listening, for your teams, how are you making sure that the person who's hiring understands that and is still looking for that? Because you may, but then all of a sudden the person's hiring is just checking a box. I got to hire somebody. Now it's qualifications and it's a degree and I'm busy. And so have you seen that, or is that as your company has grown, you've had to put in those checks and balances to make sure that these are the criteria we still continue to look for?
Yeah, I mean, we're not to the point where I'm not actively involved in recruitment and
Right.
hiring, so I'm not that big yet. But I have been, I've had 600 people working for me, in
Mhm.
in corporate structure, and that's really an important thing that you bring up, which is so as you move up, right? So my first plant was 140 people, and I was like, I knew everybody, right?
Right.
I knew everybody, knew their families, and everything. And then as you move up, and I had multiple plants and multiple responsibility, then my distance between me and the person on the shop floor increases, right? And
Right.
so this is when it's really important that you have the right, middle managers, the best expression I could use, the right managers in place, leaders in place that that understand your values and can execute those values. One of the things that on a submarine at sea, so we had to learn the captain's intent, right? So what
Mhm.
is the captain's intent? And so a lot of times he put his captain's night orders. He'd write down, this evening, right? My expectations are we're going to go from here to here. We're going to get this stuff done. We're going to make certain things get done. But it was clear his expectations, right, at all times. We knew the commander's intent. And I think
Mhm.
the same thing with when you're in that position and you have multiple people working for you, they have to understand your expectations, your intents, what you want to see done. And doesn't mean micromanagement. It means making sure they understand the type of people you want to have in the organization, the type of values that you want to have in place, right? So if I say respect is our number one priority in this company, you want to make sure that they understand that, they know that, and can demonstrate that, because they are the company to the direct reports. So that those direct reports aren't looking to me, they're looking to their first line manager, and that's the company in their mind. And is
Right.
that supervisor, is that manager carrying out your intents the way you want it to be done? Very important skill. Very different skill than managing direct people is managing supervisors. It's like 3D chess at that point. It's one more
E-
dimension you've got to look at.
Exactly. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that everyone's on someone's team. So as you move up in your example, I could still over time know the 140 people.
Mhm.
But when you get to 600, I can't, or multiple locations. Even if I took that 140 and split it over 3 locations, I'm not there all the time. So now managers, if you're in this structure, those of you listening, who is your team? And those team, to your
Yeah.
point, is I might have 5 people who are my team, and I'm coaching them to see that they're coaching that line of supervisors, or and I can't do everything. So I have to work through my people. But to your point is I have to make sure they're very clear on my intent, and it isn't micromanaging. And that is a problem because people misunderstand micromanagement, or you touch on this also as a trait in the book, and I wanted to make sure we talked about it, is those people who don't let go, who
Mm.
try to do everything. And then I think you talked about it. The chapter was the busyness. You called it
Yes.
busyness, where the managers don't talk to anybody anymore because they're so busy. They just need to get from point A to point B. Their head is down and off and
Yeah.
running, and
Yeah.
it's not intentional, but they didn't delegate out. So to your point in this example is I'm running around doing everything and everyone's going, well, what the hell's Jon doing? And Jon's changed because he just won't let go. Talk about that, because I think as we've talked a lot about all of these skills and all the things we're doing, one of the ones as you move up is letting go. And that's a very hard thing to do, especially if you were on that. In your example, I'm on the shop floor or out there, and there's busyness and there's always things going on. As you move up and you're sitting in an office, I don't care if it's still on the floor, it's almost like withdrawal, and you don't know how to let some of that go, because I feel that without me, maybe it won't work. I hope I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we incorrectly attribute busyness to importance, right? So if we're busy, we're important. And especially as you move up in management and leadership, I think it's a bad sign if you're still really busy, right? As a leader, it's not good, because what ends up happening is that you get yourself involved whatever busy activities, whether you're in meetings all day, if you are doing your to-do list, working on emails, but you're disconnected from your team, you're miss out on, we're talking about that triangle. You are no longer playing that role as the conductor between the goals, the motivation, and the people, right? So you're doing your emails or your to-do list. And a lot of managers are, I'll throw this out, it's fear-based, right? So they don't want to necessarily get involved with the nitty-gritty and hear complaints on the shop floor and what have you. So they say, I'm just going to be busy. I'm just going to pretend I'm busy. So I'm going to go to all these meetings as a way to say, oh, well, I'm important. I'm going to meetings and I'm busy. And the problem is they miss out on that connecting with the individuals and the team members. So
Right.
I say that if you are too busy to lead, you shouldn't be in leadership. So it's essential that, and essentially you nailed it, which is, how are you delegating tasks? How are you delegating duties to your team such that you have bandwidth to be able to interact with people, get to know them, have the one-on-one meetings? Because leadership is a people business. It's not a to-do list business. And so I think if you are too busy, right, that you're not getting a chance to meet with your people and talk to your people,
Right.
you've got to reevaluate. You're doing something wrong. That's not leadership.
Yeah, and when you mentioned fear-based, there's a flip side in my mind to that too, is that I don't want to let go, because there are some people that say, well, if I train Jon to do it, well, then they don't need me. And to me, that's very short-sighted, because to your point is, if I train Jon to be able to do something, well, now I have space, I have time to be able to do something more effective, I don't want to say more important, but the person who's above me, I'm on their team. They're waiting for me to let that go so they can fill my time with other things that are going to help me in my career, help the organization, versus I'm still doing that and I'm trying to do this. And I think there was a quote, I think it was in your book, where you say, if you're doing too many things, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really important. As we wind down, I want to, there's something not in the book. I was listening to your podcast, which fantastic podcast. We'll put it all in the notes for everybody to listen to. But there was a gentleman named, I did think it was Dave Nordell.
Yes.
And you both were talking about hiring veterans. And it wasn't at first I thought, oh, well, let me listen to this because I've hired veterans and, they have many of these traits we're talking about. But what really surprised me in the conversation was the struggle that veterans have getting acclimated, not because of they can't do the work, but the environment is so different than what they're used to. And so I thought, as just as sort of a little bow on this, because you came from that world and you talked about your experience with Dave, what do leaders need to understand, or what do they have to prepare or help or do in their organization to help those veterans succeed? Because in my mind, I think we take for granted that they're going to be excellent because they have these traits. But in reality, what you were talking about was it was more the failure of the organization, not them. So touch on that, because I think everyone wants to hire veterans. They're a little discouraged, maybe. I was surprised at the turnover number of veterans. That's shocked me. So what do we have to do as leaders to make our organizations better to bring in these veterans?
Yeah, first of all, I do encourage hiring of veterans because they bring such great skill sets, experiences, and they get access to a lot of responsibility at a young age. So they're great. I've hired a lot of veterans; they're fantastic. But one thing you need to know is when you make a transition out of the military, you come from a place of structure to one of no structure, literally no structure. And my example, my career switch when I went into corporate, I went from being part of a team, an essential part of a team, to no rules. Here's your cubicle. Here's your stapler. I mean, so structure is missing. Brotherhood is missing. So team, I was on a submarine at sea. I did 7 deployments where we spent 3 months, with these tight group of sailors that we had each other's backs. We were watching out. This is life or death, watching out for each other. We lose that brotherhood. We lose that group of teammates. And so when we come in, what I noticed, my experience is people go home at the end of the day. They don't want to go out for a beer. They don't want to, you don't get to know them. They just they come into work and they go home. So you lose that brotherhood and sisterhood, just that teamwork, that camaraderie. And then the last thing is purpose. So when we go in the military, we have a sense of purpose. There's a reason why we do it. We love to serve. We're serving our country. We're doing something that's difficult, but we're doing it because we love the mission. We love what we're doing. And we come into corporate life and the mission is fuzzy, if anything, if even it's even mentioned. So, so you lose a sense of purpose. So when you lose your sense of purpose, you lose your structure and you lose your friends. We sometimes as veterans get lost in companies. So we need help in those 3 areas to make that transition. So, and Dave, and that's a great episode because Dave points out some ways that you can be more veteran ready, and having just your veterans get together every week and having and build that brotherhood, making sure they understand their purpose in the organization, and providing them some structure, like how do you move up in this organization, how do you learn skills. And so those are 3 areas that veterans really need to make a solid transition.
I love that. And I think every employee needs that. I think one of the examples you used in the book, because it tied to one of the other traits of a good leader, is the power of your presence, right? It's your word. That idea of if you were on time to a meeting in the military, you were late, and now you're on time to a meeting and people roll in at whatever time and there's no repercussions, or even respect for everyone else's time. So even small things like that, but it is, it is your word. It's how you carry yourself as the leader. Everyone's watching you, especially the veterans, because they respect the chain of command, but they have to earn that respect. So I think those are really valid points. And I wanted to make sure we touched on that because it struck me in that conversation, and it would have been remiss to not focus on that, because I think we need to do more for our veterans to help them get acclimated, to help them be successful, and they bring so many great skills. So organizations, again, please listen to that episode, and like I said, I'll put in the show notes all of that episode as well as the podcast as well. Okay. So at the end, first off, thank you so much. I could sit here and chat with you forever. This is one of my favorite topics. So at the end of each episode, I ask 3 random questions. And the first one I'd love to ask you is, What right now, because as you said, you're studying for your doctorate and you're doing a lot of reading or things, what's something that you're reading or listening to or watching that's inspiring you that you would share with the audience?
I think there's a change happening in the world, and it's hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, but it used to be that large organizations had controlled the creative process. So whether it's movies, TV shows, radio shows, you needed a large team to do that. And what we're seeing is the emergence of smaller groups of people that can accomplish those same things, just given the technology that exists out there. So
Right.
you take a look at Joe Rogan, who runs a podcast, who has a small team. He gets more viewers than the number one cable news program out there.
Right.
So we're seeing that a shift in individual creativity, and individuals can make a bigger impact in the world than ever before. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm curious about it. I'm curious to see where that goes.
Great. Great. Second, what's something that you're working on yourself personally that a year from now you're going to look back and say, that was well worth my focus?
I think we should always be working on things, that for mentally, spiritually, physically, and financially. And for right now, I say my effort is in working on this doctorate program. So becoming a better leader by learning. I've spent 30 years as a practitioner. Now I'm diving deep into the academic side of it. And those two combined, I think, is going to give me some insight that few people will have.
That's great. 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 Okay. So last, we've talked about a lot, and it's just inspiring to sit here and talk with you. I'm so glad, and I appreciate you being here. If there was one thing out of our conversation that you hope the audience would take away, what would that one thing be?
I think we need to get back to the idea that leadership is a people business, and without a crew, a ship is just a hunk of steel sitting in the harbor. A crew brings a ship to life. Our people bring our business to life. Our people bring our plans to life. We can't forget that. We can't forget that when we're doing all the other things that keep us busy in the world. We got to remember that a crew brings a ship to life.
I love that. Love that. Love that. Folks, make sure you get Jon's book, I Have the Watch. Jon, thank you so much. So how can people connect with you, get the book, follow you? Where can they connect with you online?
Everything's on my website, jonsrennie.com, and you can spell Jon any way you want. You still get there. So jonsrennie.com, and you have links to my podcast, my books. I'm pretty active on social media, especially on Twitter, and reach out to me. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you learned from this conversation, maybe some deeper questions. Reach out to me. I love talking leadership. Like you, I could talk about it for hours, and I do on my podcast as well. So I enjoy it. So.
No, it's great. And folks, I just want to re-emphasize what Jon just said. I reached out to Jon because I follow him on Twitter, and the reason I followed him on Twitter is because I liked what he was talking about, but he was very open to connecting with me, and I asked him, I said, would you come on the podcast? He's like, sure. So don't be afraid to reach out to people. Jon is someone you definitely should follow. Definitely get his book. I even have the journal, which I think is great as well. It's a day-by-day way to help build your skills and document and keep your focus for leadership. So we really do appreciate that. Audience, you know the drill. Please, if you found value in this conversation with Jon, please make sure you share it out to your audience. I know there's someone in your network who could benefit from what Jon had to say. I also know there's a lot of places that you could watch and listen to content. The fact that you spent some time with Jon and me means the world to me. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe and like. This way you'll stay up. We push out episodes every single week. Our goal here is to help you become the leader that you should be and make you successful both in your personal and professional life. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But now Jon gave you a few more tips and strategies to help you become the leader. Put them in your toolbox, bring them out when you need them, and I will guarantee you that you will become the leader you want. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Jon, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.